The wind howled across the Wyoming plains, stirring the golden grass like waves upon a restless sea. Eli Hart stood on the wooden fence of his grandfather's ranch, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets, eyes fixed on the horizon where the land kissed the sky. He hadn't spoken much since arriving 2 weeks ago. 17 and silent, he carried his grief like a weight strapped to his back, unseen but unrelenting. His grandfather, Tom Hart, was a man of few words and even fewer sentiments. The old cowboy had built a life out of silence and steel, hardened by decades on the range. Eli had been sent to him after the accident, after the rodeo, after the hospital, after the earth had swallowed his brother whole and left nothing but empty space in Eli's chest. Fix the north fence by sundown, Tom had grunted that morning, tossing a coil of wire at Eli's feet. Storms rolling in. Eli hadn't replied. He just picked up the wire and headed toward the ridge, where the fence ran along the edge of the wild. No one came near that part anymore. Not since the stallion showed up. They said he was cursed. A beast without herd or home. Midnight black from mane to tail with eyes like coals, burning, watching. The locals called him Phantom, though no one had ever gotten close enough to touch him. Livestock went missing when he was near. Fence posts were found trampled, broken. Some claimed he was no horse at all, but something older, something wild the earth had forgotten to tame. Eli didn't believe in curses. But he believed in silence. And something about the way that Stallion moved, alone, proud, scarred, spoke to something broken inside him. That afternoon, with the sky brooding overhead, Eli followed the fence line through thick grass and sagebrush, boots crunching against dry earth. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and dust, and in the distance, he saw him. The stallion stood on a low hill, motionless, like a statue carved from shadow. His coat shimmered dark and sleek beneath the dull sun, muscles taut with suspicion. He was watching Eli. Not spooked. Not aggressive. Just watching. Eli slowed. He didn't know why, but he stopped walking. He didn't raise his hands or speak. He just stood there, letting the space between them speak louder than words ever could. And then, something happened. The stallion took a step forward. It was small, almost hesitant. Another step followed, deliberate, as if he were testing the weight of the air. Eli's breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded. Don't move. Don't even blink. Step by step, the stallion approached. Each footfall as quiet as smoke. He came within arm's reach, and Eli could see the pale scar that ran down his shoulder like a bolt of lightning, jagged, brutal. A mark of survival. Eli didn't know what possessed him, but he slowly reached out his hand. The stallion's nostrils flared. His ears twitched. And then, he lowered his head and touched Eli's open palm with his muzzle. A whisper of contact. Warm breath against cold skin. Eli felt something stir in his chest. Not quite joy. Not quite peace. But the beginning of something. The first crack in the ice. Then it all shattered. A gunshot rang out, sharp, sudden, echoing off the ridge like a warning from the heavens. The stallion jerked back, hooves pounding the earth as he reared and turned, disappearing into the tall grass like smoke caught in a gust. Eli spun toward the source of the sound, and saw his grandfather standing at the edge of the trail, rifle in hand, face hard as iron. That horse don't belong here, Tom said, voice flat. He's trouble. Eli opened his mouth, but the words never came. He looked at the ground. The moment was gone. Back at the ranch, the storm began to move in. Clouds gathered like bruises across the sky. Rain started as a whisper, then rose to a roar on the tin roof of the barn. Eli sat in the loft, legs dangling over the edge, staring at the empty pasture below. His fingers still tingled where the stallion had touched him. He knew he should be angry at his grandfather. But it wasn't just the shot that drove the stallion away. It was the world. A world that saw beauty as a threat. That mistook wildness for danger. Just like it had with his brother. Jesse had been wild too. Laughed louder, rode faster, lived bigger than anyone Eli knew. The arena lights, the applause, the thrill of the ride, it was all a game to Jesse. Until the bull bucked too hard. Until his head hit the rail. Until silence fell. Now Eli lived in the echo of that silence. The next morning before dawn, Eli returned to the ridge. The grass was wet with dew. Mist curled around the trees like ghostly fingers. He sat beneath the same hill and waited. Hours passed. Then, movement. The stallion stepped from the shadows. He looked different now. Not fearful. Not cautious. Just tired. A kind of exhaustion Eli understood. They looked at each other and Eli didn't move. This time the stallion didn't come forward. But he didn't leave either. He stood there, eyes locked with Eli's rain-matted mane falling over his forehead like a tangle of secrets. Eli whispered, "You're not cursed, are you?" The wind answered in a hush. Later, back at the house, Eli found an old newspaper clipping tucked in the bottom of a drawer in the barn office. It showed a photo of a black stallion, rearing in a steel pen, ropes tightening around his legs, eyes wild with terror. The headline read, "Rogue Mustang escapes rodeo carnage, 3 injured." Eli stared at the date. 2 years ago. Around the same time his brother had started training for the circuit. He turned the paper over. In shaky handwriting someone had scribbled, "Too wild to break." Eli's chest tightened. That night, as the wind howled outside, he lay awake replaying the stallion's eyes, the scar on his shoulder, the trembling touch on his hand. He had to know more. He had to understand. But even more than that, he wanted to see him again. Wanted to stand beside something wild and feel, just for a moment, that being untamed wasn't the same as being alone. The ranch was quiet as Eli slipped out under the moonlight, boots crunching softly on the gravel path. Somewhere beyond the hills, the black stallion waited. And Eli knew, he had just taken the first step toward something that couldn't be undone. The wind had changed. Eli felt it in the trees, in the hush between heartbeats, in the eyes of the stallion when they found each other again at the river bend. It had become a routine. Each morning before chores, before his grandfather's voice barked orders through the cracked kitchen window, Eli slipped away. He would follow the river upstream, where cottonwoods grew thick and sunlight filtered like gold through the branches. The black was never waiting, but he was always near. A shimmer of dark between the trees. A flick of a tail. A shape against the wind. He never tried to touch him again. Not yet. The trust was still too new, too fragile. Instead, he brought apples, stolen from the kitchen with quiet fingers, and left them near the water. Some days they'd be gone. Some days they'd rot untouched. But always the stallion would appear. Watchful. Ghost-like. Real. Eli started talking. Not loudly and never expecting an answer. But the words came easier out there. He told him about his brother, about Jesse's laugh, his crooked smile, the way he used to tuck Eli's boots in the stirrups before every ride. He talked about the silence that followed. About the funeral no one cried at. About the ache that followed him like a shadow. And in the stallion's stillness he found something that felt like listening. One morning Eli returned to the barn with mud on his boots and a smile he didn't try to hide. His grandfather sat on the porch sharpening a knife, a habit he performed with the focus of a man trying to cut something more than steel. "You been wandering out past the line," Tom said without looking up. Eli didn't answer. He kept walking. "You know what that horse did?" Eli stopped. "What horse?" Tom raised his eyes. "Cold, unreadable. That black devil. You know where he came from?" Eli turned. The words came before he could swallow them. "He's not a devil." Tom stood. The knife glinted in the morning sun. "He's dangerous. And if you're smart, you'll stay away from him." There was a pause, thick as smoke. Eli took a step forward. "Why do you hate him so much?" Tom's jaw tightened. He looked out toward the hills where the grass swayed in slow waves. "That horse is the last thing your brother ever rode." The words hit like a stone to the chest. Eli felt the ground shift beneath him. "He wasn't supposed to be in that pen," Tom continued. "That Mustang wasn't broken. But Jesse, he thought he could do what no one else could." Eli shook his head. "You never told me that. There wasn't nothing worth telling that. But you blame the horse?" Tom's voice cracked like thunder. "I blame the wild that took my boy. That horse, he's got death in his eyes. And if you go chasing him, he'll take you too." Eli didn't say anything. He just turned and walked. Fast. Away from the house, the knife, the pain. His boots hit the dirt like drumbeats. In his chest, something had cracked open. Later, back by the river, he sat alone. The stallion didn't come that day. Maybe he sensed the storm inside Eli. Maybe he was giving him space. Or maybe he was just gone. Eli sat until the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the water. He needed answers. That night, after his grandfather had fallen asleep in the armchair, snoring gently with a half-empty bottle beside him, Eli crept into the old tack room. Dust floated in the moonlight slanting through the rafters. He found the old trunk near the back, the one with Jesse's name carved into the lid. Inside, under old rodeo posters and belt buckles dulled with time, he found a notebook. Jesse's. Pages filled with scrawls, diagrams, notes about horses and practice routines. And near the end, clipped to a page, was a photograph. A black stallion. Mid-rear. Eyes wide with terror. Ropes wrapped tight around his legs. On the back, in Jesse's handwriting, untouchable. They call him the Black Wind. I think I can reach him. Eli stared at the words until they blurred. The next morning he returned to the ridge before the sun could burn the mist from the grass. And this time he waited. He whispered his brother's name to the wind. And as the mist thinned, the stallion appeared. He stood still, powerful and worn, eyes catching the early light like twin suns. Eli stepped forward, not fast, not bold. Just enough. I know what happened to you, he said softly. The stallion didn't move. I know what they did. I know what my brother tried to do. I think, maybe you knew he meant no harm. The stallion blinked slowly. His ears flicked. I don't want to break you, Eli said. I just want to walk with you a while. If that's all right. Slowly, Eli reached into his coat and placed a single apple on the rock between them. The stallion stepped forward, paused, then took it. They stood in silence, the sun rising over the hills behind them. Two survivors sharing breath. It became a ritual, a quiet understanding. And then one day the rhythm shattered. Eli was returning from the ridge when he heard voices near the barn, voices that didn't belong. A sleek black truck sat by the fence. Two men in polished boots were speaking to Tom, holding papers, gesturing toward the hills. Got confirmation from the state, one of them said. That Mustang's unbranded, wild, and off the reserve. That makes him fair game. Tom crossed his arms. He's a killer. The man smirked. That's why the buyer wants him. Rare specimen. He'll pay handsomely. All we need's a place to set the trap. Eli froze. His heart punched against his ribs. He turned and ran. Faster than his legs had ever moved. Past the barn, the river, the bent fence line. He didn't stop until he reached the ridge, breath ragged, lungs burning. The Black was grazing beneath the trees. Come. Trusting. Eli stumbled toward him, waving his arms. You have to go. They're coming. The stallion raised his head, alert, nostrils flaring. They're going to catch you. So you have to leave now, go back to wherever you came from. But the Black didn't move. He just stared, unmoving. And then Eli saw it, blood. A dark line running down the stallion's leg. A snare half hidden beneath the grass, biting deep into flesh. No. Eli dropped to his knees beside him. His hands fumbled with the wire, heart hammering as he worked it loose. The Black flinched but didn't run. Didn't kick. It's okay, Eli whispered. I've got you. I've got you. The trap fell away with a metallic clink and the Black took a step back. Limping. But free. A sound broke the quiet, tires on gravel. Headlights cutting through the trees. Eli turned. 3 trucks. Men with ropes. One of them carrying a tranquilizer rifle. Panic surged. Eli stood in front of the Black, arms wide. Run, he shouted. Go. But the stallion didn't move. He stepped forward, beside Eli. Not behind him. Beside. The headlights drew closer. Eli grabbed the stallion's mane. If you won't go alone, then we'll go together. And in the next breath, they ran at Eli's lungs, screamed as the world blurred around him. Branches whipped his arms, roots clawed at his boots, but he didn't stop. The Black ran beside him like a shadow made flesh, wounded yet wild, thundering through the trees with a grace born from fire and fear. Behind them, engines roared. Yells cut through the forest. Metal gates clanged in the beds of the trucks. Traps, snares, cruelty masked as control. They weren't just chasing a horse. They were hunting defiance. Eli veered downhill toward the dry creek. The Black followed, his breath hot and ragged in the morning air. Blood still matted the stallion's fetlock, but he ran like the wind had swallowed his pain. There's a clearing ahead, Eli panted. We'll lose them, just a little further. The path narrowed. Rock walls rose on either side, funneling them like cattle. Eli felt the change in the Black's rhythm. His strides faltered. The limp worsened. But still he ran. They broke into the clearing moments before the trucks crested the ridge. For a second there was only silence. Birds startled from the trees, leaves spinning in the air like gold coins. Then tires skidded. Doors slammed. Men with rope and metal and greed poured in. Eli turned. No. He stepped in front of the Black again, arms spread. But this time the stallion didn't wait behind him. He surged forward, ears pinned, hooves pounding. A force of fury unleashed. One of the men aimed the tranquilizer rifle. Eli screamed. The Black swerved at the last moment, hooves striking the ground inches from the man's chest. The gun flew. A second later, so did the man, toppled by fear more than force. The others hesitated. Not because they saw the boy but because they finally saw the stallion for what he was. Not a beast. Not a prize. The storm. Back off. Eli shouted. He's not yours. Tom appeared behind the men, boots crunching the gravel. Stand down, he growled. They turned surprised. He's your horse? One asked. Tom didn't answer right away. He looked at Eli. At the stallion standing guard beside him, eyes blazing, chest heaving. He was my son's, Tom said quietly. And my grandson's now. The men protested. Contracts. Bounty rights. But Tom's voice silenced them. Get off my land. They left. Not in anger. In awe. And when the last truck vanished into dust, the clearing held only the sound of breathing. One boy, one stallion, and a man who just let go of grief heavy enough to drown. Tom stepped closer. He chose you. Eli nodded, tears caught in his throat. He saved me. Tom stared at the black. I spent so long blaming him for Jesse. Maybe it wasn't him I was angry at. Eli didn't speak. Some truths didn't need words. They got the black home slowly. Tom brought out the old rope halter, but Eli didn't use it. He just walked and the stallion followed. Like he always had. At the barn Eli cleaned the wound. The black didn't flinch. He trusts you, Tom said. That ain't something you force. It's something you earn. Eli smiled. I think we saved each other. Days passed. The world quieted. The black stayed close to the ridge but didn't vanish into the wild again. He lingered, watched the house from a distance, came when Eli called. Then one morning Tom stood at the porch holding a rolled-up letter. His face unreadable. It's from the bureau, he said. They know the horse is still out here. They're sending a team. Eli's stomach dropped. But you told them he's ours now. Tom's voice was low. He's not registered. Not tagged. No brand. By their law he's still wild. And by their law that makes him theirs. Eli felt the fire rise in his chest. They'll take him. Break him. He won't survive that. Tom looked away. You might have to let him go. Eli shook his head. No. Not after everything. We didn't come this far to lose him now. That night, sleep never came. Eli sat by the barn, the black beside him, moonlight dancing in the stallion's dark mane. He rested his hand on the horse's neck. You don't belong in cages, he whispered. You never did. He thought about running. Hiding. Crossing state lines under cover of darkness. But the black wasn't hiding. He stood tall. Proud. And that's when Eli understood. It wasn't about keeping him. It was about giving him the choice. The next morning, the sun rose blood-red over the hills. Eli led the black to the far fence line. Beyond it stretched thousands of acres. Forest, valley, rivers untouched by roads or rules. He opened the gate. The stallion paused. He looked at Eli, then at the open land. Then back again. Eli didn't cry. Not this time. I'll always be here, he said. If you want to stay. But if you want to go, go. The wind stirred the grass. A hawk circled high above. The earth held its breath. And then, slowly, the black stepped forward. One stride. Two. Then he stopped, turned, and walked back to Eli. Not out of fear. Not out of habit. But because he chose to. The air was different that morning, sharper, filled with a kind of silence that knew something was ending. Eli sat on the fence rail, watching the horizon turn gold with dawn. Beside him, the black stood motionless, his breath rising in soft clouds as if he, too, was waiting for whatever came next. Tom hadn't said much the night before. Just a nod, a glance, and the words, "They'll be here by noon." But Eli knew time didn't matter now. What mattered was choice, and the black had made his. He hadn't run. He hadn't vanished into the wild hills or disappeared into myth like so many stallions before him. He had stayed. Even now, he nudged Eli's shoulder gently as if to remind him, "I'm not a ghost. I'm here." Eli reached up, brushing his hand through the stallion's thick forelock. "They'll want proof," he said quietly. "Papers. Scars. A brand burned into your skin." The black didn't flinch. "But you're not theirs," Eli added. "You never were." The hum of tires rolled through the valley like thunder, low and steady. The bureau's truck pulled up slowly, two men stepping out, their uniforms crisp, eyes unreadable behind dark glasses. Tom walked out to meet them, a file in his hand. He didn't greet them with anger, just calm resolve, the kind that came from years of standing up for what mattered. "I've filed an exemption request," he said, "claiming him under sanctuary provisions. This land's protected. So is he." One of the men flipped through the file. "No microchip. No federal tag. How do we verify this is the same horse? Eli stepped forward. He'll prove it. They looked at him skeptically. Tom gave a slight nod. Eli turned to the black, stepping into the center of the corral. The world fell away as he lifted his hand. The stallion didn't hesitate. He trotted forward, graceful and powerful, circling Eli once before stopping right behind him, nose resting gently on the boy's shoulder. Eli didn't move. He just whispered, "Let's show them." And with a subtle movement he began the routine he had practiced in the fields, not to tame, but to talk. A step, a gesture, a whistle, and the black mirrored him, pivoting with perfect precision. A dance of trust, not control. A performance forged not in training but in survival. The agents watched in silence. When Eli stopped, the black came to stand at his side, not waiting for praise but offering loyalty. The man with the clipboard looked at the stallion, then at the boy. And something shifted behind his glasses. Doubt maybe. Or respect. "He's not like the others," he muttered. Tom nodded. Because he was never broken. After a long pause the man signed the file. "We'll recommend approval. On-site check-ins, bi-monthly. But he stays." Relief flooded Eli's chest. He nodded once, afraid that if he spoke the tears would come. When the trucks left the dust didn't feel like ash anymore. It shimmered like promise. That evening Eli took the black out into the hills, past the fence line, through the meadow where they'd first stood together beneath a sky split by lightning. He stopped near a tall cedar tree and sat. The stallion stood beside him, ears flicking with the wind. "There's something about freedom," Eli said softly. "Everyone talks like it's wild. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's choosing who you run with, who you trust enough to walk beside." The black dipped his head, nuzzling the boy's knee. Eli looked toward the setting sun, streaking the sky with fire. "I thought I needed to keep you, protect you. But I was wrong. All I ever needed to do was believe in you." Silence. Peaceful. Honest. The kind that didn't need anything added to it. A week passed. Then another. Spring painted the valley in color. Wildflowers blanketed the fields. Life moved forward. And the black remained. He ran with the herd during the day, returning to the house at dusk like a ghost tied to the land by memory and promise. Tom had built a shelter in the back pasture. Not a stall, just a place to rest. But the black rarely used it. He preferred the open sky. Sometimes Eli would wake to find him outside the window, just standing there as if checking that the boy was still safe. Then one night, without warning, he was gone. Eli waited through the dawn, heart heavy. Another day passed. Then two. No hoof prints. No distant cry. Tom said nothing, but his silence was a comfort, not a wound. They both knew this moment would come. Eli returned to the cedar tree, the same place he'd sat weeks before. He stared out at the horizon. And then he smiled. Because he knew. The black hadn't left him. He had kept the promise. To be free. To live without fear. To never be broken again. And Eli had kept his promise too. To protect him. To let him choose. To love without a leash. A wind swept through the hills, rustling the tall grass in waves. And somewhere far off, past the line where fences ended and freedom began, a black stallion ran beneath the stars.